Hi, and welcome back to the Fortify Your Brain Summit. I'm Betsy Schroeder, your host, and today I have as my guest Dr. Venus Ramos. And Dr. Venus is known as the Biohacking MD. She's a licensed physician in the specialty of physical medicine and rehabilitation who received her medical training at Yale University, the University of Miami, and the University of California in Irvine. She has a thriving medical practice in Southern California and has competed for 20 years as a national level fitness athlete. A repeat guest expert on the TV series The Doctors and featured on several other shows, including NBC's American Gladiators and ABC's The Bachelor Paris. She also contributes to multiple health outlets, including iHeart and Oxygen Magazine. Welcome, Dr. Venus.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being asked to speak. This is amazing.
Thank you so much. So to begin with, can you just share a little bit about your background and then how you got interested in health and fitness?
Well, as far as my background goes, you touched on it a little bit as you were introducing me. I am a physician, but during my medical school years, during my training, that's when I was introduced to the world of fitness competition. So at that time, I was pretty much up for any challenge at all. And I remember just sitting around talking to friends while in Miami Beach. And we were at a sports bar, actually. And on the television, ESPN was showing the Fitness America competition. And one of my friends said, "Hey, you should try to do that." Are you challenging me? So of course, always up for any challenge. I immediately went home that very day. I Yahooed, because back then we did Yahoo, not so much Google. I Yahooed the Fitness America competition and saw that they held it every year right there in Miami Beach. So it was very convenient for me to try it myself. And ever since then, I've been doing fitness competitions. Actually, I did it for 20 years after that point in time. So I did compete for 20 years, and having that interest in fitness, moving on and becoming a physician into my medical practice in rehab, I wanted to maintain that focus on health and fitness and really preventing people from having to come see me as a doctor, hopefully. So that is why I continue to try to do so through my online group program.
Excellent. So with all of that, with all those challenges, there must have been some amount of stress. So how do you manage stress? What happens, in our bodies when we're under stress, and how does that impact us, especially the brain?
Well, stress is something that the response to stress actually is something that we've developed, and you probably have heard of the flight or fight response. It is something that humans develop to respond to any of the stresses that humans had in the early days. So those stresses usually is a response to some type of an attacker or a predator trying to come after you. So if you have that, you always have that picture of the saber-toothed tiger, and it may actually have technically been not a saber-toothed tiger, but we like to use that as an example. Yeah. So you have a predator coming after you, your cortisol levels go up because you need a higher blood pressure to get blood into those muscles. You need a higher heart rate so that you can run away, or perhaps you need all of those things so that you need a higher blood sugar so that you have the energy to either run away or even fight off the predator. So these are the things that naturally happen to our body. These are the things that need to be done so that we can survive that particular stress. And as we continue to evolve, perhaps we do not have the same predators and stresses that happened when we first developed this cortisol response, but our body is still reacting the same way to the stresses that we currently have. So we don't have saber-toothed tigers, but we have traffic that we deal with. We don't, perhaps we're not faced with a bear, but on a regular basis. But then we have our natural work stresses, or even family stresses, the schedules that we give each other. These are still stresses in our lives, and our body still responds the same. So we're still getting the elevated blood pressure. We're still getting the higher, we're still getting the rush of the blood sugar into our system so that we can have the energy to fight or flee. And we don't necessarily do that. We don't necessarily do the fleeing
Right.
correctly in our bodies. So the response would normally be, let's use this higher heart rate, this higher blood pressure. Let's use this blood sugar so that we can run away, or perhaps run, just perhaps do some exercise to use this. And then we have all of these responses in the body that we're not using. And when that's consistently elevated, these responses are consistently happening in our body, and we're not using them the way that they were supposed to be used, that can lead to a lot of detrimental effects in our bodies.
Okay, so then what are some of the symptoms of like elevated cortisol over time?
Well, this elevated cortisol, it can actually do a lot of things to the body. It has an effect on almost every system in the body. I mentioned the heart rate and the higher blood pressure in terms of the cardiovascular system.
Yeah.
I already spoke about the blood sugar having to have that energy. So you're talking about the more of the endocrine system involved in maintaining your blood sugar levels. It also has effects on your sex hormones. It also has effects on your immune system. It has effects on your brain, which is the primary focus of this particular summit, and the effects of higher cortisol on the brain.
Mm-hmm.
It affects the hippocampus, where learning occurs in your brain. This is a part of the brain where you actually encode memories. So when you have an elevated cortisol level consistently, there have been studies that have been done to show that the hippocampus actually starts to shrink. So those moments in the day where you are running around trying to do things and stay on top of your schedule, and you run into a room and you're like, okay, why did I just come into this room? Or those moments that you are seriously searching around for your keys and you can't figure out where you last put them. These are all those moments where perhaps your memory isn't quite as sharp as it could be because of that elevated cortisol level that's been consistently and chronically elevated in your body. The key is that cortisol is actually not always a bad thing. It did develop over time as a response in human beings because there were benefits to it. There were benefits to our survival in terms of being able to flee from predators or to fight them off. There were benefits in terms of being able to fight infections. There were benefits in terms of healing wounds. These are all things that are important for cortisol to be intact for this cortisol system. But the problem is we're not doing a good enough job of keeping those cortisol levels in check.
Makes sense. So what are some things we can do, like especially lifestyle changes? I know you mentioned exercise, that helps.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the key things, because that's what the cortisol elevation was meant to do. The elevation was meant to give you the ability to do physical activity that was going to get you out of that stressful situation. So you're not going to be running away from a predator, but you can be running on a treadmill. You may not be trying to fight off an attacker, but you can be doing some kickboxing instead. So these are all things that you can do to help manage that cortisol level and bring it down the most natural way that it was built to be lowered. It was developed to be lowered by physical activity. So that's definitely something that we can do on a regular basis. And the other key is that when you're doing this physical activity, when you're doing exercise, you will get the wonderful effect of endorphins. And this kind of ties back into what the other effects of elevated cortisol is. And elevated cortisol can affect your mood. You can start to become a little bit more depressed when you have higher cortisol levels. So that changes, elevated cortisol actually changes what's happening in terms of the neurotransmitters of your brain, serotonin, dopamine. It actually affects the function of them. And we think that it's because cortisol is affecting the receptors for these neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine. As we all know, serotonin is very well known as being the feel-good hormone. Yeah. So when you don't have the function of that feel-good hormone, then your mood is definitely going to be affected. You may feel a little bit more down and out. The depressed mood is a common thing that can happen when your cortisol levels are chronically high. So that's another way that it can affect your brain and its function. So exercise, get those endorphins and elevate that mood, and then you can start to break the cycle of this chronically high cortisol level. Okay. There are a whole lot of other things too that you can do on a regular basis to keep your cortisol levels in check. Okay. Now remember, I'm not trying to say we always need to have these low cortisol levels, because we need a regular peak of cortisol and a lowering of cortisol throughout the day so that your body can perform its regular daily functions. So you do need times where you have higher cortisol, and then it should start to decrease as the day moves on and you move in towards the evening. These are the normal variances in cortisol. So you do need it in order for your body to function. But it's the stresses that we undergo in life that are causing the cortisol level to stay high consistently, regularly, and chronically. That's when all of the problems can start to occur in our body and our mind. So one of the easiest things I like to recommend people to do is to take a breath. When you're feeling stressed, just take a breath. And what I mean is deep breathing. If you just take a moment to take 10 slow, deep breaths with a good focus on the exhalation part of your breath, meaning you're spending more time in breathing out than you are in your breathing in. That's going to really focus on lowering your cortisol levels. The exhalation is actually tied to the parasympathetic part of your nervous system. There's a sympathetic and a parasympathetic part of your nervous system. So spending more time in the exhalation phase, breathing out phase of your natural breathing, then you're going to focus more on the parasympathetic system. This parasympathetic system helps in terms of lowering your blood pressure and your heart rate, which is what cortisol is doing the opposite of. Cortisol is bumping that up, so the parasympathetic system helps to bring that back down. So 10 slow, deep breaths can have an amazing effect on your body and help in lowering your cortisol levels. So I'm not asking you to do a whole hour-long yoga session. I'm not asking you to do a whole hour-long meditation session. Just 10 slow, deep breaths, spending more time in your exhalation phase compared to your inhalation phase. So easy to do. Definitely easy, quick, simple way of doing a reduction in your cortisol level.
Excellent. Are there any other lifestyle strategies that are helpful besides exercise and breathing for that?
Numerous things that you can do. Music, simple. Turn on some music that really makes you feel good. Music, studies have shown, helps lower your cortisol level. Laughter can help lower your cortisol level. So sit down and watch a half-hour comedy show. I mean, someone is telling you that TV is good for your health. Hey!
Yeah.
How amazing is that? And how easy is that? One little tip I have for you is if you're watching your typical half-hour sitcom, do some squats during the commercials, so you'll throw in some physical activity in there as well. That way I don't get the people, fitness trainers everywhere telling me, why are you telling them to sit on the couch? Yes,
great.
That's definitely something that can do. Laughter can help lower your cortisol levels. And human connection, that's another one that can really help lower your cortisol levels. And that is super key right now. Now that so many people are in quarantine or in isolation or less likely to be out and about meeting and greeting people, human connection is really, really important. So however you can get that, even if it's through a virtual video call, or even if it's through a simple phone call to someone else, make sure you stay connected to your family and friends in some way. Usually I would say just give a hug, but now we have to, with COVID-19, we have to be a little bit careful of who we're giving hugs to, or at least be careful that we have all these precautions in place when we do so. So human connection is also another way that you can help lower your cortisol levels.
Excellent. So what about dietary strategies? What should we be eating to keep our cortisol levels in check?
Well, this is actually something a little bit counterintuitive because of what I explained with your blood sugar, the need for the blood sugar to flee or to fight. But when you are taking in sugary foods that have a high glycemic index, for those of you who know that term, but in essence, just sugary foods. Those types of foods are really going to increase your cortisol levels. They really cause a stress on your body because they can cause increased inflammation to occur in your body. And again, this is when you're consistently taking in sugar on a regular basis, you're going to be consistently elevating your cortisol levels because of the inflammation that can occur in your body, because your body is seeing that as a stress. The caffeine can cause elevated cortisol in your body. Alcohol, another stressor on your body that can cause elevated cortisol. So these are things that you should avoid because they can increase cortisol in your body. But there are things that you can do, of course, to decrease your cortisol level, and foods that are going to be anti-inflammatory are ideal because they are going to be less stress for your body. That means things like probiotics, things like yogurt, kombucha, tempeh, miso, kimchi. Those are fermented foods that give you the probiotics, or fermented pickles that you can eat, sauerkraut. All of these things can help in terms of reducing or at least keeping your cortisol levels in balance. Again, we're not always wanting a low cortisol level. We just want things to be kept in check and kept in balance.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that you can focus on eating, and then of course I mentioned the sugary foods, alcohol and caffeine as things that can bump that up. So perhaps avoid those. But the key about foods and looking at your diet, the diet mindset, always worrying about cutting calories, always worrying about I need this many grams of carbs, this many grams of protein, or this many grams of fat. If you become so obsessive about that you're stressing out about that,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be pretty much undoing what you're trying to accomplish, because the stress of stressing about a diet is going to cause an increase in your cortisol level, which pretty much undoes everything that you're working towards, because elevated cortisol can definitely lead to retention of your body fat. So don't stress out about your diet. Just make simple changes to your nutrition habits that are easy for you to maintain, that don't cause you stress.
Makes sense. So you have a really busy life, and there must be some stresses. How do you keep your cortisol levels balanced and, fortify your brain and all of this?
Well, this has been a particularly busy time for me in the hospital and nursing homes that I work in. But I am really focused on things that I can fit into my life. As far as physical activity goes, I just do a simple walk. That's a simple walk every morning, 20 minutes, just to make sure I get it in. Even if I don't get in that half-hour sweaty session, at least getting in that 20-minute morning walk in the day. That is actually a great way for me to start my day, and it makes me feel much better about things.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I try to make sure I do each day. It makes me feel less bad if I don't quite have the time to fit in that workout. At least I got in some physical activity. The other thing I like to do is the very easy thing that I mentioned as one of the first actions you can take to keep your cortisol levels in check, and that's the deep breathing. And what I actually like to do is called the 4-7-8 breath. So that means I'm inhaling for a count of 4, hold my breath for a count of 7, and then exhale for a count of 8. So I just do about 4 rounds of that, and I can already start to feel everything calming down whenever I'm in a stressful situation. I actually will even just throw that in the middle of the day as I'm driving.
Yeah, right.
Because no matter what, even if traffic may be a little bit lighter, a commute can still be somewhat stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any favorite stress-reducing foods that you like to eat?
Oh my goodness. Well, the stress-releasing foods, I don't want to say, I have to mention this because it's true. Dark chocolate is a food that can help lower your cortisol levels, or at least keep them balanced. Again, I don't want to say lower, but it can help keep your cortisol levels balanced. But dark chocolate should not be taken in excess. Just 1 or 2 ounces, 1 ounce actually a day is sufficient of dark chocolate, but it is a favorite of mine. We don't want to necessarily take in extra sugar and extra calories that comes with dark chocolate. So some pure dark chocolate, 80% cacao or more is most ideal for that particular goal.
Mm-hmm. All right, and I think you had a free gift for viewers that you wanted to mention.
Oh, absolutely. This free gift is one way that you can actually make sure that you are getting some activity in, and that you are getting the right types of foods in your body, and that you are doing the right lifestyle activities that are going to keep your cortisol levels in check and actually optimize how your body and mind is functioning. You can actually do this in just 15 minutes a day. That's right. I'm not asking you to spend an hour on a treadmill. You heard me. I don't have time for an hour on a treadmill. So in just 15 minutes a day, there are actions that you can take that can truly help optimize your body and keep your cortisol levels in check. And that's in my 15-minute Better Body Blueprint. So if you head over to the link, you'll be able to get that for free and see what you can do in just 15 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Where else can people find you online then?
It's very easy to find me online. My website is drvenus.com. That's DOCTOR. You have to spell out the whole doctor.
Okay.
And then you can also find me on Instagram, DocVenus, DOCVENUS. Easy to see.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and expertise today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I am so thrilled to have been able to talk to you and your audience.
Thank you so much. Take care.